We have a stack of sources today that honestly reads less like a history lesson and more like the screenplay for some kind of high-stakes political thriller.
It really does. There's a lot going on.
I mean, I'm talking about a narrative that features a maximum security prison break, a state-sponsored political assassination,
Mm.
and a finale involving a king who is, and get this, I am not making this up, eaten by worms.
It is, without a doubt, one of the most cinematic chapters in the entire New Testament. We are looking at Acts chapter 12.
And just to situate ourselves, looking at the timeline, we're sitting roughly around AD 44. The location is Jerusalem. But before we get into the gory details, and there are definitely some gory details, what's the actual mission of this deep dive? Because, on the surface, it just looks like a collection of crazy stories.
Well, the mission is really to understand a massive tonal shift that's happening. If you look at the early chapters of Acts, despite all the friction, there was a sense of explosive, almost unchecked growth for the church.
Right, it felt like they were constantly in trouble, but also constantly winning.
Exactly. It was the honeymoon period, if you want to call it that. But Acts 12, this really marks the end of that era. We're moving from, a story about internal growth to facing a state-sponsored violent crackdown.
Oh, okay.
The sources paint this picture of a church that is no longer just a theological nuisance to the Sanhedrin. Now it's become a political target for the king himself.
That distinction is huge. I mean, it's one thing to be hated by the religious leaders in your town. It's a whole different ballgame when the entire state machinery turns against you.
It is.
And the hook that really grabbed me in the reading material is the paradox of how that machinery works, or, doesn't work. You have one leader who's executed without any fanfare at all. It's like blink and you miss it.
Mm-hmm.
Another is miraculously rescued in a way that just defies physics. And then the antagonist, the king, meets a demise that is both, grotesque and also highly symbolic.
It's a study in contrast, absolutely. You've got the perceived, the very visible and imposing power of Rome and the Herodian dynasty versus the often invisible, but, as the chapter argues, far more potent power of God.
So just to orient everyone, what sources are we working with today?
Our sources for this are pretty robust. We have the biblical text of Acts 12, obviously, but we're also pulling from historical commentaries that reference Flavius Josephus. He gives us the secular account of these events, which is fascinating.
Oh, that's great. So we get an outside perspective.
We do, and we've also got deep theological analysis from places like the Expositor's Commentary, the MacArthur Study Bible, and the Moody Bible Commentary. So we're getting it from all angles.
Fantastic. Let's start with the antagonist then. A new villain enters the chat, so to speak. The text introduces him simply as Herod the King. Now, I was looking at the family tree in the notes because, let's be honest, the name Herod is everywhere in the New Testament. It feels like the Smith of biblical villains.
It really does. It gets very confusing.
So this isn't the same Herod who tried to kill baby Jesus, right?
No, and that is the most common point of confusion. And it's really crucial to unpack the Herod dynasty because if you don't understand who this specific man is, you miss the entire psychological motivation for why he's attacking the church.
Okay, break it down for us.
The Herod in the Christmas story, the one who ordered the massacre of the infants in Bethlehem, that was Herod the Great. He's the grandfather.
Okay, Herod the Great is the grandfather. He's the builder, the paranoid tyrant, the guy who is brilliant and monstrous all at once.
That's him. Then we have the Herod who was involved in the trial of Jesus, the one Pilate sent Jesus to.
Right, I remember that.
That was Herod Antipas. He's the one who had John the Baptist beheaded, a detail that seems to run in the family, apparently, and he was the uncle of the man we're discussing today.
So the villain of Acts 12 is?
Herod Agrippa VI. So just to recap, you have the grandfather who killed the babies, the uncle who killed the Baptists, and now the grandson, Agrippa VI, who is targeting the apostles.
It's a dynasty of trauma, a family business of persecuting God's people. But, looking at Agrippa the teen's profile and the source material, he seems more complex than the others. He's not just a brute. He seems smoother, more political.
He was a survivor. His background is fascinatingly chaotic. I mean, you have to remember, his grandfather, Herod the Great, was so paranoid he executed several of his own sons. Agrippa's father was one of those executed sons.
Wait, really? So Agrippa teen grows up knowing his grandfather killed his father?
Yes. Can you imagine that family dynamic? He was sent to Rome for his education and, frankly, for his protection. He was essentially raised alongside the imperial family. He became childhood friends with the future Emperor Claudius and was very, very close with Caligula.
So he's a cosmopolitan Roman. He's walking the halls of power, making friends with future emperors. He's a player.
A huge player. But he was also a complete disaster in his personal life during his youth. The Expositor's commentary describes him essentially as a playboy. He racked up absolutely massive debts in Rome trying to keep up with the imperial lifestyle.
So he was living beyond his means to impress his powerful friends.
Massively. He eventually had to flee Rome just to escape his creditors. There's actually a historical note that he ended up in a fortress back in Idumea, seriously contemplating suicide because he was so broke and humiliated.
That is a wild pivot. From suicidal and broke in a forgotten fortress to being the king of Judea. How on earth does he make that comeback?
Connections. It was all about who he knew. When his friend Caligula became emperor, everything changed overnight.
The mad emperor Caligula.
The very one. He released Agrippa from a prison he'd landed in. Apparently, Agrippa had made some careless, drunken comments against the previous emperor, Tiberius, and someone snitched.
Of course.
Caligula frees him and just gives him a kingdom. And later, Claudius expanded it. By the time we get to Acts 12, Agrippa rules a territory that's roughly the size of his grandfather's.
That's incredible, but what does that backstory do to him psychologically?
Well, here's the key insight from the sources. Because he had such a shaky, insecure start, and because his family was essentially hated by the Jewish people for being Idumean and not, Edomites, not fully Jewish Agrippa, I was obsessed with approval.
Ah, so he is the ultimate populist. He's a politician who lives and dies by the polls.
Precisely. That is the perfect way to put it. The sources describe this fascinating duality. When he was in Rome, he was a cosmopolitan Roman. He enjoyed the baths, the theater, the whole lifestyle. But when he was in Jerusalem, he was the observant Jew.
He played a part.
He played it perfectly. Josephus mentions that he would read the law of Moses publicly in the temple and even weep at the emotional parts. He participated in the rituals. He went way out of his way to curry favor with the Pharisees and the religious establishment.
Which is a huge shift from his grandfather, who basically had a policy of, I don't care if you hate me as long as you fear me.
Right. Agrippa desperately wanted to be loved, and that context changes everything about Acts 12. It means his actions against the church aren't necessarily because he has some deep theological issue with Jesus.
It's a political calculation.
It's all politics.
Yeah.
The Jewish leadership was getting more and more frustrated with this growing sect called the Way, so Agrippa decides to throw them a bone. The text says he stretched out his hand to harass some from the church.
And that harassment escalates to murder very, very quickly. We see the first blow, and it is shocking in its suddenness. The text says he kills James, the brother of John. Just to clarify for everyone listening, since we're dealing with multiple Jameses as well, this is one of the big three, right? Peter, James, and John.
Yes, this is James, the son of Zebedee, one of the sons of thunder, as Jesus called them. And you have to stop and think about who this guy is. He was in the absolute inner circle.
He was there for everything.
Everything. Peter, James, and John. They were the only ones allowed in the room when Jesus raised Jairus' daughter from the dead. They were the ones on the Mount of Transfiguration seeing Jesus in his unveiled glory. They were the ones Jesus asked to watch and pray with him in Gethsemane.
And now he's just gone. He becomes the very first of the 12 apostles to be martyred.
The first of the 12, yes, a monumental moment.
And the method of execution is listed specifically as with the sword.
Which implies beheading. And the MacArthur Study Bible makes a really interesting connection here. It notes that this specific form of execution beheading was supported by Jewish tradition for those accused of leading the people to worship false gods, based on a reading of Deuteronomy 13.
So the method itself is a message.
A very clear, coded signal. By using the sword rather than, say, stoning or crucifixion, Herod was broadcasting to the Sanhedrin. I'm on your side. I'm defending orthodoxy against these deceivers. It was a strategic move to solidify his base. It's just brutal efficiency. But here's the thing that I really struggled with when reading the text, and I think a lot of people do. The death of this major figure, an inner circle apostle, is covered in essentially 2 sentences. He killed James, the brother of John, with the sword. That's it. There's no final speech from James, no earthquake, no angel swooping in to break the sword. He's just gone.
It is jarring. It feels incredibly anticlimactic.
Yeah.
And it forces us as readers to confront what the Moody Bible commentary calls the mystery of God's sovereignty.
Yeah, why?
The why. You have to put yourself in the shoes of the church members at that moment. They're praying. They know James is arrested. They probably expect a miracle. I mean, they've seen them before, right? And then The news comes he's dead. It just defies our human desire for a fair narrative. Why is James allowed to die while, as we're about to see, Peter is miraculously saved?
It's the question we still ask today, isn't it? Why does one person get the miraculous healing and the other person gets the funeral? Exactly. And the sources don't give us a tidy theological bow to wrap around that question. They don't try to explain it away. They simply present it as the reality of living in the kingdom of God.
That's a tough reality.
It is. But you have to remember, James and his brother John had once asked Jesus if they could sit at his right and left hand in the kingdom. And Jesus asked them, "Can you drink the cup that I drink?" They boldly said yes.
And this was him drinking that cup.
This was James drinking that cup. His role in the redemptive plan was to be the first martyr of the 12. Peter's role was to continue on. Both glorified God, but their paths were drastically, painfully different.
So Herod looks at the political fallout. He sees that killing James pleased the Jews. His approval rating spikes.
It's pure dopamine for a populace like him. He thinks, okay, I'm on a roll here. That worked better than I could have imagined. If killing one of the lieutenants made them this happy, imagine what killing the leader will do. So he arrests Peter.
This is the escalation. He's not just harassing anymore. He's going for the head of the snake. But the timing is tricky. The text makes a point to note it was during the days of unleavened bread.
Right, which is the Passover season. And this is highly significant for two big reasons. First, the religious tension in Jerusalem is at its absolute peak. The city is packed with pilgrims from all over the world. Nationalistic fervor is sky high. It's a powder keg.
And an execution could set it off?
It could. But second, it also creates a logistical problem for Herod. He couldn't just drag Peter out and execute him during the 7 days of the feast because, under Jewish law, that would be seen as a desecration. A public trial and execution would mar the holiness of the holiday.
So he has to wait. He has to keep Peter on ice until the festival is over.
Exactly. Which means he has to hold him for several days.
But he isn't taking any chances. When I read the description of the security measures, it just sounded like complete overkill. I mean, we're talking about a fisherman who preaches, not some kind of trained commando. But Herod locks him down like he's Hannibal Lecter.
It really is absurd when you break down the actual military protocols being used. The text says he delivered Peter to 4 squads of soldiers.
Squads?
Yeah, and the Greek term there refers to a quaternion. A quaternion is a specific military squad of 4 men. So Herod assigns 4 quaternions, a total of 16 soldiers, to guard 1 man.
16. Walk us through how that rotation would even work.
Well, Roman night watches were typically divided into 4 watches, each about 3 hours long. So every 3 hours, a fresh team of 4 soldiers would take over.
So no one gets tired.
No one gets tired. No one falls asleep. You have fresh, alert eyes on the target constantly. It's maximum security protocol.
And the physical confinement itself, it wasn't just, hey, here's a cell.
Oh, no. This is where it gets incredibly claustrophobic. The text says Peter was sleeping between 2 soldiers and he was bound with 2 chains.
2 chains.
The standard practice for a maximum security prisoner, often called being bound with military chains, meant the prisoner's right wrist was chained to a guard's left wrist. In Peter's case, he's double chained. His right hand is chained to one guard, and his left hand is chained to the other.
So he literally cannot scratch his nose without waking up 2 Roman soldiers who are physically attached to him.
That's it. And then you have the other 2 soldiers from that quaternion standing guard at the cell door, and then there are other guards at other posts down the hall. It creates layers and layers of security.
It's a prison within a prison.
It is. To escape, you'd have to somehow get out of the chains without waking the guys attached to you, get past the 2 guys at the door, get past the other sentries in the hallway, and then somehow get through the main iron gate of the fortress. It's designed to be impossible.
Why? I mean, why go to this extreme length?
Because of Acts chapter 5. You have to assume the authorities have a file on these guys by now. They remember. They remember that the apostles had been arrested before and had mysteriously escaped. We know they were released by an angel and were found preaching in the temple the very next morning.
They looked like fools last time.
Exactly. And Herod Agrippa is a smart, cynical man. He knows the rumors. He is essentially saying, not on my watch. There will be no magic tricks this time. He wants to make a huge public spectacle of Peter after Passover, a show trial followed by a public execution, and he is ensuring that no magic, no bribery, and no trickery can possibly get Peter out.
It's almost like he's challenging God directly. He's putting the full weight of Roman steel and military procedure against whatever spiritual power this group has.
That is the central conflict of the chapter laid bare. And the source material highlights this beautiful, stark contrast. You have Peter, bound with chains, locked in what was likely the fortress of Antonia, guarded by 16 men. And then in verse 5, you see the church's weapon.
What's that?
But constant prayer was offered to God for him by the church.
The word constant there, or earnest in some translations. I read in one of the commentaries, I think it was the expositors, that the Greek word used there is ektines. It's a medical term, isn't it?
It is. It's an athletic or a medical term that implies stretching or straining. It's used to describe a muscle being stretched to its absolute limit. It's the very same word used to describe Jesus praying in the Garden of Gethsemane.
So this wasn't just a polite, Lord help Peter if you have a moment kind of prayer meeting.
Not at all. This was agonizing, fervent, sweat-inducing spiritual labor. They were straining against the reality of the situation with everything they had. The contrast is powerful. Peter is bound, but prayer is loosed.
So we have this setup. It's the night before the trial. This is literally the 11th hour. If nothing happens tonight, Peter dies in the morning.
That's the timeline. The execution is scheduled for dawn.
So let's go inside that cell. What is Peter doing? Is he pacing? Is he writing a final manifesto on the wall? Is he weeping?
He is sound asleep.
Sleeping. Between two guards who are literally waiting to lead him to his execution.
Deeply asleep. So deeply, in fact, that when the angel shows up a few moments later, the angel has to physically strike him on the side to wake him up.
That is a level of chill that I just cannot comprehend. I mean, most people would be a complete wreck.
It speaks volumes about Peter's state of mind, and the sources suggest two possibilities, and they probably work together. One is just pure exhaustion. Prison life is draining. The Passover week would have been incredibly stressful.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But the more likely theological reason is trust. Do you remember the conversation in John 21, right after the resurrection?
Where Jesus restores Peter after the denial. Feed my sheep.
Yes. In that conversation, Jesus specifically told Peter, when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will dress you and carry you where you do not want to go. He prophesied Peter's eventual martyrdom, but he specified when you are old.
And Peter knows he isn't old yet.
Exactly. He's likely holding on to that promise. He knows this isn't his time. Or even if he misunderstood and it was his time, he had seen the risen Christ. He knew death wasn't the end. He was at peace.
That's a powerful thought. So the intervention begins. An angel of the Lord appears. A light shines in the cell. Now pause here. If a bright light suddenly shines in a pitch-black dungeon cell, shouldn't the guards wake up? They're chained to him.
You would think so. It's a logical question. But this seems to be a selective revelation. The light illuminates the cell, but it doesn't disturb the guards. Peter wakes up eventually, but the guards right next to him, the ones chained to his very wrist, they remain completely oblivious. It's like a localized stasis field. They're just out of it.
So the angel strikes Peter, wakes him up, and says, arise quickly. And then we get the mechanics of the miracle. This isn't just poof and he's outside. It's a very deliberate step-by-step process.
Right. And the first step is amazing. The chains fall off. The text says they just fell off his hands, supernaturally released but silently. The guards don't stir. No clanking metal. Nothing.
And then the angel's demeanor. It's so calm.
Incredibly calm. It's not panic. He's not saying, run, run, the alarm is going to go off. He tells Peter to get dressed. Gird yourself. Tie on your sandals. Put on your garment.
It's so methodical. It reminds me of a parent waking up a groggy kid for school. Come on, put your shoes on. Where's your coat? Let's go.
That's a perfect analogy because Peter is in a complete daze. The text explicitly says he thought he was seeing a vision. He didn't realize any of this was physical reality. He's just following orders, putting one foot in front of the other, thinking he's in some kind of dream sequence.
So they just walk out of the cell.
They walk out. They pass the first guard post, unnoticed. They pass the second guard post, unnoticed. This implies they're walking right past alert, awake Roman soldiers who just don't see them.
That's incredible. And then they come to the iron gate that leads to the city.
And this is where we see the first automatic doors in history. The text says the gate opened to them of its own accord. The Greek word used there is automatre. It's the root where we get our word automatic.
I love that detail. I was reading in the background notes that this gate would have been massive. Iron-plated, incredibly heavy, probably barred from the inside. It would take multiple men to heave it open.
Exactly. This was the final major barrier between the fortress and the city streets, and it just yields, it swings open, no key, no picking the lock, no struggle. It opens automator. It suggests that the physical barriers of the world simply have no say when God is moving.
So they walk out. They go down one street, and then, as abruptly as he arrived, the angel just departs. Peter is left standing there, alone, in the cool night air of Jerusalem.
And that's the moment the movie camera would zoom in on Peter's face. The dream ends and cold, hard reality hits him.
The sensory details must have just rushed in all at once. The cold air on his skin, the sound of his own breathing, the feeling of the stone pavement under his sandals.
He comes to himself, as the text says. He realizes, wait, I'm not sleeping. I'm standing on a street. The chains are gone. Herod is going to wake up to an empty cell. He says out loud, now I know for certain that the Lord has sent his angel and has delivered me.
Delivered him from the expectation of the Jewish people. The expectation being his public execution the next day.
Precisely. They were expecting a show, a political victory for Herod. God gave them a disappearing act instead.
So Peter's free, but he's a fugitive. He is, at that moment, the most wanted man in Jerusalem. He needs to go somewhere safe. He heads to the house of Mary, the mother of John Mark. And this brings us to part 4, which I honestly think is one of the funniest scenes in the entire Bible. It's pure comedy right in the middle of a thriller.
It really is. Luke, the author of Acts, is a brilliant historian, but he clearly appreciates the profound irony here. So Peter arrives at this house. Now let's set the scene properly. This was likely a large home. Mary was clearly a woman of some wealth, with a courtyard and an outer gatehouse.
So there's a gate, and then a courtyard, and then the main house.
Correct. And inside, the church is gathered and praying. They are likely terrified. They know James is dead. They know Peter is next on the list. They are pouring their hearts out to God.
Fervently praying for Peter's release, right?
That's what the text says. So Peter gets to the outer gate, and he knocks on the door. And a servant girl named Rhoda comes to answer.
Now, you have to imagine the tension. It's the middle of the night, a knock at the door. That's terrifying. It could easily be the soldiers coming to arrest more Christians.
Absolutely. So Rhoda goes to the gate, probably very cautiously, and she listens. And she hears a voice she knows. She recognizes Peter's voice.
And this is where the slapstick kicks in. She is so excited, so completely overjoyed that she forgets to open the door.
She leaves the fugitive, the very man they are all praying for, standing exposed in the street, and runs back inside to tell everyone the good news. Peter is at the gate.
Can you just imagine Peter's perspective? He's looking over his shoulder, probably hearing patrols in the distance, knocking a little louder, thinking, open the door, Rhoda, any time now.
Meanwhile, inside, she bursts into the prayer meeting with the news. And what is the response of this group of faith-filled prayer warriors? Do they say, hallelujah, God has answered our prayers?
Not even close.
No. They turn to her and they say, you are beside yourself, which in modern English is, you're crazy. You've lost your mind.
The irony is so thick you can cut it with a knife. They're literally in the middle of a prayer meeting asking God to save Peter. God saves Peter. Peter's knocking on the door. And they tell the messenger she's insane because that's obviously impossible.
It highlights a very human struggle with faith that hasn't changed in 2,000 years. It's so relatable. We often pray for mountains to move, but we are absolutely shocked when a single pebble shifts.
They had enough faith to ask, but not enough expectation to actually receive.
It seems so.
Yeah.
They were prepared for his death. They were not at all prepared for his deliverance.
But Rhoda, she sticks to her guns, though. She insists, no, really, it's him. I heard his voice. And then they pivot to a theological explanation that is just. It's quite interesting. They say, it is his angel. What does that mean?
This gives us a fascinating window into popular Jewish theology of the time. There was a common superstition or belief, you can find it reflected in some intertestamental writings, that a person's guardian angel could assume their physical appearance or their voice.
Oh, like a doppelganger?
Sort of. And this was often seen as a harbinger of death or something that happened right after a person died. So when they said, it is his angel, they were likely resigning themselves to the idea that Peter had already been executed in the prison and his spirit or his angel was now visiting them to say goodbye.
So they were more ready to believe in a ghost story than an answered prayer. That's incredible.
Seems that way. And meanwhile, Peter's still outside knocking and probably getting dangerously loud at this point.
Guys, seriously, open the door. The Romans are looking for me.
Eventually, they give in. They go and open the door, and the text says they were astonished. It must have been absolute bedlam. Everyone is talking at once, shouting, maybe crying. Peter has to motion for silence, probably a frantic gesture with his hand, because they are making way too much noise for a house hiding a fugitive.
He quickly tells them the story of the rescue. And then he gives an order that I think is really easy to miss, but you flagged it in the notes as absolutely critical. He says, tell James and the brethren. Then he leaves for another place.
This is a crucial pivot point in the book of Acts. If you blink, you miss the transfer of power happening in that one sentence.
Wait a minute. Tell James, we just spent the first part of this deep dive talking about how James was beheaded.
Right, and this is where the modern reader can easily get confused. The James who was beheaded was James, the son of Zebedee, the brother of John, the apostle. The James that Peter refers to here is James, the brother of Jesus.
Okay. The man who later wrote the Epistle of James, the one who wasn't a believer until after the resurrection.
That's the one. And this comment by Peter, go tell James, signals a massive shift in leadership. Up until this point, Peter has been the dominant central figure in the Jerusalem church. But from this moment on, Peter begins to fade from the narrative of Acts.
Really?
Yes. He appears briefly in the Jerusalem Council in chapter 15, but the focus of the book shifts dramatically to Paul and his missionary journeys. And in Jerusalem, the administrative leadership of the church shifts from Peter to James, the Lord's brother.
Why that shift? Why James specifically?
The sources suggest it was a matter of both political and cultural necessity. James was known in early church tradition as James the Just. He was a very devout, Torah-observant believer. He still kept the Jewish vows. He was highly respected, even by many non-Christian Jews, for his piety.
So he was seen as less of a radical than Peter?
Much less. As the pressure from Jewish nationalism was rising in Jerusalem, as a zealot movement gained power, Peter, the man who had eaten with Gentiles like Cornelius, was becoming a liability. He was seen as too radical, too compromised with the outside world. James, with his strict adherence to the law, was a much better fit to navigate the church through this intense political crackdown in its home city.
That makes so much sense. So Peter realizes he's a lightning rod. By staying, he endangers everyone. He has to go underground to another place. The text doesn't say where. He's just off the grid.
He's off the grid. Which leaves a very messy and, as it turns out, very bloody situation back at the prison.
The sun comes up, the morning shift change happens, and Peter is gone.
The text describes it as no small stir among the soldiers. That is a massive, almost comical understatement. This was sheer panic. The chains are empty on the floor. The doors are still locked from the outside. The guards at their posts are still standing there, but the prisoner has vanished into thin air.
Herod is furious. He interrogates the guards. Obviously, they have no explanation that makes any sense to a secular Romanized king. An angel did it is not going to hold up in a military court.
Not at all. And so we see the brutal, unforgiving nature of Roman law. The Code of Justinian, which codified earlier Roman practice, states it very clearly. A guard who allows a prisoner to escape suffers the exact penalty intended for the prisoner.
And Peter was meant to die.
Peter's meant to die, so the guards must die in his place.
Herod orders their execution. We're talking about those 16 men.
It's likely at least the 4 who were on the immediate watch were executed, but given Herod's rage and public humiliation, he may well have wiped out the whole contingent. He is completely humiliated. His big approval rating stunt has backfired spectacularly. He looks weak. He looks incompetent.
So he does what frustrated politicians often do.
Yeah.
He leaves town to escape the bad press.
He does. He goes down from Judea to Caesarea. And this sets the stage for the final dramatic act of our story, Part 6, the fall of the king.
We move the scene now to Caesarea Maritima. What's this place like?
This is the Roman capital of the province. It's a grand coastal city built by Herod the Great himself. It's very Roman. It has a huge theater, a hippodrome for chariot races, palaces. It's Herod's home turf. And he's there, and he is still in a foul mood. The text mentions he's very angry with the people of Tyre and Sidon.
These are the big trade cities to the north of Israel, in modern-day Lebanon. What's the beef there?
It's an economic trade war. Tyre and Sidon were huge maritime powers, but they had very little agricultural land of their own. They were heavily dependent on the produce of Galilee, which was Herod's territory, for their food supply, grain, olive oil, etc.
So Herod has them over a barrel.
Completely. And being petty and powerful, he had likely cut off their supply or imposed heavy sanctions. They were desperate. They were facing famine if he didn't relent.
So they have to play the political game.
Right.
The text says they bribe Herod's chamberlain, a guy named Blastus, to get a hearing.
Yeah.
They need to smooth things over.
Exactly. They need an audience with the king. So a day is set. Josephus, the Jewish historian, tells us this was likely a festival honoring Claudius Caesar's birthday. The great theater in Caesarea is packed. We're talking thousands of people.
And Herod makes an entrance.
And what an entrance it is. The Bible just says he was arrayed in royal apparel. But Josephus, the eyewitness historian, adds a detail that is just incredible. He writes that Herod's robe was made entirely of silver.
Pure silver, like woven from threads of silver.
That's how he describes it, woven silver. And Josephus notes that Herod made his entrance into the theater early in the morning, just as the sun was rising over the Mediterranean.
Oh, I see where this is going. This is stagecraft.
The highest form of stagecraft. Imagine the visual. He walks out into the center of that amphitheater. The morning sun hits that silver robe. He wouldn't just shine, he would be blinding. He would look like he was literally made of light. It was a calculated special effect designed to make him look supernatural, godlike.
He sits on his throne, he gives a speech and oration, and the crowd, who we know are desperate for a trade deal, they start chanting. They know exactly what he wants to hear.
They shout, "The voice of a god and not of a man."
It's the ultimate flattery. They're just stroking his ego to get their grain shipments back. But Herod, he likes it. He
Yeah.
believes it.
This is the moment of judgment. You have to contrast this with Acts 10. Remember when the centurion Cornelius fell down to worship Peter? Peter immediately stopped him, pulled him up, and said, "Stand up, I myself am also a man." He refused to steal God's glory.
But Herod doesn't do that.
Herod drinks it in. He accepts the worship. He allows himself to be elevated to the status of a deity. And in that moment, he crosses the line.
And the response from heaven is swift and terrifying.
Immediately, an angel of the Lord struck him.
The phrasing there is so chilling. It's the same agent, an angel of the Lord, that struck Peter in the cell to wake him up.
Exactly. One angel strikes Peter to liberate him. Another angel strikes Herod to terminate him. It's this perfect, terrifying parallel that shows God is sovereign over both the prison and the throne.
And the cause of death. It's not a heart attack, it's not a stroke, it's worms.
Because he was eaten by worms.
I have to ask, because the sources go into this. What are we talking about here? Is this a metaphor for, a slow decay of his kingdom?
No, the medical commentary, combined with Josephus's account, suggests it was very literal and unbelievably gruesome. Josephus writes that he didn't die immediately. He lingered for 5 days in agonizing pain in his abdomen.
5 days.
5 days of agony. The best medical guess from modern pathologists looking at the ancient descriptions is a severe acute infestation of intestinal roundworms, the species Oscaris lumbricoides.
Okay. Trigger warning for anyone who's squeamish.
Yeah, this is not pleasant. These parasites can grow up to 10 to 16 inches long inside the human body. If they multiply rapidly, they can form a bolus, a tangled ball, that completely obstructs the intestines. This causes gangrene, septic shock, vomiting, and excruciating pain. Essentially, his insides ruptured and were consumed. It is a humiliating, wretched way to die.
The irony is staggering. The man who stood there glowing like a god in a silver robe, soaking up the worship of the crowds, is consumed from the inside out by the lowest of creatures, worms.
It is the ultimate divine statement on human pride. The man who wanted to be a god literally became worm food. It echoes the prophets like Isaiah, where God says, "I will not give my glory to another." It was a public, horrifying demonstration to the entire Roman and Jewish world that there is only one true king, and it wasn't Herod Agrippa.
So the chapter wraps up with a kind of scoreboard check. The conclusion, let's just tally it up. Herod,
Dead.
the 16 guards,
Dead.
martyred, yes.
But alive in the presence of God.
Deep.
Free and active, continuing the mission.
And the church, the movement he tried to crush.
Verse 24 gives us the powerful tagline for the whole chapter. But the word of God grew and multiplied.
I love that word, but. Herod did his worst, but the word grew. The state came against it, but the word grew.
That is the theme of the book of Acts in a nutshell. You can kill the messenger, you can imprison the leader, you can intimidate the followers, but you cannot stop the word of God. In fact, history shows, time and again, that opposition usually acts like gasoline on the fire of the gospel. It was true in AD 44, and it has been true in every century since.
The source material also mentions one small detail at the very end. Barnabas and Saul, that is, the Apostle Paul, return from their relief mission to Jerusalem, and they take someone with them back to Antioch.
Yes, they take John Mark, the cousin of Barnabas, the son of Mary, the woman who owned the house where that chaotic prayer meeting happened.
The kid who likely saw the ghost of Peter standing at the door while Rhoda was screaming and everyone else was calling her crazy.
That's him. This young man, having just witnessed firsthand the power of prayer and the miraculous deliverance of Peter, joins the mission team. And this sets the stage for the first great missionary journey in the very next chapter. The torch is being passed. The gospel is now moving out from Jerusalem to the ends of the earth.
It's a perfect setup for the rest of the book. So, as we wrap up this deep dive, we've seen political intrigue, divine intervention, the high cost of leadership, and some pretty graphic biology. But I wanted to leave the listener with a thought to chew on. We talked about Rhoda in that prayer meeting.
Yes, the unbelief of the believers. It's so human.
It's funny, but it's also deeply convicting. They prayed earnestly, but they didn't really expect the answer to be standing at the door. So here is the question for you listening. How often do we pray for mountains to move in our own lives, but we keep our eyes fixed on the ground? Are we maybe missing the miracle because we've already decided in our hearts that it's impossible? Are we leaving our answer standing out at the gate because we're too busy analyzing the problem inside?
That is a profound question. Faith isn't just asking, it's expecting the door to open.
Something to think about. That's Acts 12. Thanks for diving in with us.